Hello, everyone. My name is Felix. If you're not aware, I'm from Ledger. I'm here to do an onboarding today. Um, Wanted to go through some more niche issues that you might encounter. So, what I was going to do is we'll assume that you guys have been through some parts of the onboarding before, and we'll go from there. We do have one of my colleagues in the chat as well, and they're going to be answering your questions as we go. Once I get towards the end, we'll be able to answer your questions as well live. But besides that, I think the thing that I always mention, please don't give out your 24 words. Don't sign any transactions that you don't trust or from any weird sources. We don't want you guys to lose your assets. And I do see that, Karen, turning up that volume for you now. So hopefully that is better for you guys going forward. Now, first thing I wanted to go through though is I have already set up my device, right? So what I wanted to go through is a potential problem that you guys might run into if you guys are doing so. So I've reset my instance of Ledger Live, and I'm going to go and go through the instance of Ledger Live as if it's for the first time. I'm just entering my test pin for this one, and we'll just pop into Ledger Nano S Plus, since that's the device that I have with me at the moment. And in this case, because I've actually already popped the recovery phrase onto the device itself, I'm going to go and select Connect My Ledger Nano S Plus, because I already have my recovery phrase, it's already set up. What will happen is it goes through that recovery check. And when doing so, you should be able to allow the Ledger Manager to be able to enable a secure connection. That currently is slightly different. I'll have to get on the guys about that one in particular. But looks like, thankfully, the genuine check has gone through all perfectly, and we can continue on from there. Now, what I've actually done to give you guys a better idea, maybe you guys can jump in if you guys might know what the potential issue could be, would be that I've actually already set up an account on my Ethereum. Now I put it on Gurley as opposed to onto the mainnet, which is the test network, but the effect is the same. What I've done is I've already added an account in MetaMask, and I'm using that to manage my accounts already. And I just wanted to add a new account into Ledger Live. Now, when I add an account now, hopefully it'll synchronize and you'll be able to see, wait, I should have what I actually had tried to get was 0.2 Gurley ETH, but it doesn't seem to be appearing here. I think I wanted to go through this. This is someone that I actually spoke to quite recently, and it's a bit of an interesting potential root cause here. So it's totally empty. You can see, I don't know, like at the moment, I quote unquote don't know why. And yeah, it's all empty. Now, I'm just going to I'm just going to get my instance of MetaMask out, and we're going to have a look at it, and you'll be able to see that, yes, actually indeed. Let's pop this down here. And we'll wait for that to load. You can see there's two Gurley ETH there, right? We can even go to Etherscan. So these are the kind of tools that I'd normally be wanting you guys to run through, especially if I'm talking to you in particular. These are the first things I'd be like. I'd always like to check what's happening on chain first, right? I'm actually on the wrong one. I need to be on Gurley Etherscan, but you can, if you don't know, you can copy your address here, and then you can actually check that here. And you can see just recently there was a transfer here, so I should have some Ethereum here. What's going on? So I'm going to pop back onto my Ledger Live in particular. Now, you can see here it is empty. So the first thing would be, okay, I want to check what address this would be. And really, the most simple way I would suggest is that you would be able to go through to receive and go through that process there. I can understand that it can be a little bit inconvenient, but it is definitely always the safest way to know what your address is. This is especially if you're sending and receiving. I think we've mentioned this a lot and we got called out for it, which I love, but it means that the message is getting out there that you guys will be able to avoid any issues that you're having with any address poisoning with by going through the receive process. Now, the next thing though I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the edit account, and if you guys have played around with Ledger Live, you might have seen this in particular. You can go into the advanced tab down here, and we'll be able to grab the address here, and immediately you can see that the addresses are different. A86 versus 0x20388. So obviously something went wrong, right? With when I might have, something's different when I set up my Ledger device on MetaMask versus when I set up my Ledger with Ledger Live in particular, rather. So what can we do to troubleshoot? First thing I'd be doing is I would go through and check the process that I went through in MetaMask. Now, normally we can go through the connect hardware wallet feature, right? So I'm going to do that now. And what this can tell me what derivation path indexes have already been added. So I've actually already connected it, and go from there. You can see that. And I can see what's already been added, what hasn't been added, which derivation path I've used. And in this case, I've made it really simple. That I've used the second index for the account. Now, you might have, if you've set it up within MetaMask previously, you might have used, the 5th one or the 10th one or whatever that might be. And while it's perfectly okay, what is causing us the issue here is that Ledger Live will only go through the first index, the first account essentially that it's looking for. And if it doesn't detect any transactions, it'll stop looking for any accounts that it needs to add, right? So a bit of a niche issue, but I wanted to share it because it shares some particular things that Ledger Live might do that might affect your experience. So what would we have to do? Well, in this case, to get around this issue, what we might want to do is just send some transaction to that previous address, and then we'll be able to see this new account once we add it. So what I can do now, let's just send, I have to go grab the address. So in this case, because I already went through the more niche way of getting the address, we'll go through the proper way. Now again, you'll see some warnings and things like that. That's generally okay. So my device is locked indeed, so we'll just unlock that and then we can go from there. Now, just wanted to mention as well, if you are just catching up, that if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat. We'll try to answer them as best we can. I'm sure you can see that my colleague is in there right now trying to answer all those questions as well. I'll try to get through to those questions as best I can right up towards the end as well. All right, just hitting the receive, and perfect, I've got that there. So you can see that it shouldn't take too much time for you guys to go through the receive process. So I really always do recommend that you guys do so in particular. Remember, this is essentially the Ledger device being asked by Ledger Live to get the recovery, not the recovery phrase, but the public key, essentially the address from the device. Say, hey, I need to grab this address, I need to grab that address. from you, and so you know that it's correct and secure. What you can do as well, make sure you approve that and make sure you check the digits and the hex against what you see on screen. If something is awry, if something is different, that should be raising red flags for you immediately. Please, 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 you can get a hold of us. First thing I'd be doing is potentially checking for malware. Check the version of Ledger Live that you're using in particular. The other thing would be, and I think hopefully this should be quite clear, is that if Ledger Live or anything even purporting to be Ledger Live asks you for your recovery phrase, it is not the genuine version of Ledger Live, or it might be some form of malware as well. It's really important. This is a really key piece that you need to make sure is always secure. Don't even take photos of it. Don't even encrypt it and put it onto a offline computer or anything like that. I mean, that's a bit extreme, but I think as long as it's on paper and it's in a secure place, that is generally going to be the most secure way. Even, we've heard of cases where cloud services can be compromised. So there are many ways, many threats, and if you keep it on paper, it's generally going to be the best way. But enough of me rambling on about that. Let's get this transaction onto this address. Doesn't have to be any minimum amount. This isn't like any of the any of the other chains that I know of. Let's say, for example, Tron, which might require a minimum, or XRP, which does also potentially require a minimum. But this one, I'm just going to pop in 0.001, no, and then we'll pop that through from there. Easy. Same nonce. You see it's the first transaction, and we'll just send that through now. Now, I need to make sure to confirm this and accept it on my device itself. Again, when you're dealing with anything that has clear signing, make sure you check all of the fields, make sure you check everything is correct. Why? Because if something is different from the screen as opposed to on the secure screen, so your Ledger device, then something is definitely wrong. And that's the real value that the Ledger device, not only does it hold your recovery phrase and therefore allows you to make sure you know you are the only one that's signing the transaction for a particular address, but it also, you can also check those details. You can make sure that you're sending to the right address, you are sending the right amount and everything like that. So it's not just about fat fingers, it's just about making sure that you're not, the screen, the computer that you're interacting with and you're using potentially isn't trying to make you do something that you don't want to compromise your security. So first thing I might do, I saw that it was confirmed, but I can always double check. Now, block explorers come in many forms. I am sick of this light mode, but they come in many forms, and Etherscan, if you're not already aware, is the big one that we'd normally be doing for any EVM chain, generally speaking, or one of their forks, and you can see that that has been confirmed. So if I go back to Ledger Live, doesn't seem like it's there at the moment, and there we go. It's already appeared. So now if I go about and I add an account, so girly, remember, boom, it should come up for me. I just got to wait a little bit while that waits to appear. And after that, we should be okay from there. There's no reason why you would want to leave that in there. If you don't want to use that, it's okay. You can take it out again or anything like that. Essentially, just to give you a better idea, the reason that we need to do this is because, again, Ledger Live stops looking for the subsequent index when it sees an account with no transactions. So it just needs a transaction in there. It doesn't need a balance or anything like that. So that's that in terms of the small thing I wanted to go through today. we've already gone through some of the adding accounts. I had already updated my Ledger device just in preparation for this today, but I did potentially want to go through that. If you are experiencing any issues, there is a huge amount of them that can be resolved through updating the Ledger device. Now, there is something that can be quite confusing, is that it might say that the firmware is up to date, but if you're using an older version of Ledger Live, then the device, the Ledger Live doesn't know that it needs to grab even the actual most recent version. So that is the thing to also update as well. So in order, you would want to update, well, first of all, your operating system. Make sure you're operating on at least Windows 10, I would say. Then make sure Ledger Live is up to date. You would always want to head to ledger.com. Now, in doing so, you just want to make sure that the domain is 100% correct, right? Ledger.com, you don't want to go, if you go to Google, for example, and I know I have an ad blocker on at the moment, but let's pause that for a second. And if I type in Ledger support or something like that, I know that potentially there's going to be a lot of scams that come up. Oh, I'm not sure. In any case, make sure it comes from the ledger.com domain. I know the guys in our brand protection team are always looking to try to take down as many scams as possible, but check the domain at all times. That is probably the most important thing, one of the most important things that you can come across. You can go to apps and services and Ledger Live, and then you can just install over the previous installation. Actually, there's no need to uninstall the previous version if you don't want to, and everything like that. It'll even retain most of the settings that you might have in terms of, you know, your accounts that you've added from multiple devices and things like that. So it would download there and select the OS version that you have. All right. So because I know that I'm on the latest version, and it should also be looking for the latest version of the Ledger device firmware as well, and then we can go from there. So going through, I'm just going to double check some of the questions. I see that Dan has gone through and answered a significant number of them. John, just a quick scan through. I don't see the question in particular. So just as a heads up there, maybe you want to rephrase it. It might be being blocked by some of the content, potentially, something like that, just as a heads up. All right. So some of the other things that I wanted to run through might be through the Discover section. Now, if you're just getting your device set up, of course, you're going to want to add your accounts. You're going to want to know what addresses you're going to receive the assets from. Generally speaking, I expect that you'd be receiving assets from an exchange. And so generally speaking, yep, you go to add accounts, and then boom, boom, boom. And then you should be able to go from there. Oh, looks like after clicking on click hash, it has a warning that says may lose information. So make sure you have your seed phrase. Let me get onto that, because I did have Dan just call me out there right in the chat and right in public. What it means is when you do that, when you reset your device, when you update your device rather, what could happen? Let's say if I disconnect my device right in the middle of an update, the device might reset. And the reason we ask you that you want to have your recovery phrase with you is, in that case, while relatively niche, we want to make sure that you'll still be able to manage your assets in that way, right? So if you do have your recovery phrase with you, the device resets, you're all good. What you can do is make sure, you might need to go through the repair tool. Now, that's going to be in the settings. Most likely you're not going to need this, but can go to help and there's a repair. Now this is like it says, if it froze during the firmware update, you might want to go through this process. But in doing so, what might happen is that if that happens, you can just reset your device and go from there. All right, and I can see the other ones there, other questions there as well. First, I do see what you mentioned there, Rob T. But John, you mentioned if the device is not functioning anymore, what are the practical steps? Do I get a replacement by sending it back? How much time will it take? So generally speaking, let's go. If the device is not working whatsoever, so if the screen isn't working or anything like that, if the screen isn't working or anything, yep, you potentially could send it back to us. You'd want to get a hold of us, and we can see what we can do. It might depend on when you bought it, who you bought it from, and things like that. But definitely get a hold of us if there's actually something physically wrong with it. Now, other than that, in terms of how long it might take, it would generally depend on where you might be located. So, for example, I know Ledger, how long will my order take to reach me is the one. And you can always get that as an estimation. Where is the list? There's a list of estimated timeframes for just the delivery, right? So once you get a hold of us, we might have a chat with you and go from there and see if we can send a new one out to you. All right. So that's the general process. It might change depending on what you prefer, what you want to do, and go from there. So hopefully that answers your question, John. Chime in the chat if you have any more questions. Now, Jyoti, you mentioned you'll contact the police officer. That's perfect. I do remember speaking to you previously. It is a tough thing to always hear with regards to losing assets. Now, with regards to that, it's generally because the recovery phrase has been compromised, which is really tough. But we always recommend then to get your assets off if you still have any remaining assets. Now, next step after that would be to reset your device. Now, the reset device will have no relation to the reset recovery phrase, rather, will have no relation to the other recovery phrase. So you can continue using that and going on as you might normally. Now, that would be the general thing. With regards to getting assets back from someone, the only way that we'd be able to sort out and get funds back to you would be if we would need to compel the person that has access to the private keys for a specific address to send those funds back. Now, generally speaking, that's why we liaise with law enforcement, because these are the people that will be able to do the best for us and help you in doing so. So that's what we generally recommend. Now, next thing, Rob T, you also mentioned you'd like to know if it's necessary to clear cache occasionally. I don't actually clear the cache pretty much at all. I wouldn't say it's necessary even for performance sake. It might be something you'd want to do if you're having issues with maybe the data that you're seeing within Ledger Live. Let's say if I jump into accounts here and this balance is not correct, is not what I'm expecting, for example, then it's definitely something we'd want to potentially investigate. Clearing the cache is definitely potentially one of those initial steps that we generally recommend. Other than clearing the cache, there could be other things, but that's normally the first thing that they might recommend in terms of if the balance is wrong, if something about the data that's being retrieved from the infrastructure that we'd send the information for, if something might not be adding up. Now, all of the data is local, so that's why that might need to be the case. Now, I'm going to keep going down from you, Rob T. Now, Karen, I've been trying to speak up as much as I can, but they definitely don't want those neighbors to shout out at me. So I'll try to be as loud as I can for you there. Now, FRMCF also mentions, hi team, I've got a question about a ledger with Polkadot parachain tokens. Will you be able to answer that during the session? I'll scroll up if you have anything more specific there, mate. Yeah, I can see that, but if you can go into more detail, I mean, we'll try to answer it as best we can. Yeah, we'll go from there. All right. And with Karen, yeah, I know that you've mentioned that support hasn't gotten back to you. I've scrolled up. I did see when we were about to start the streaming session. Now, I'll just read out what you've mentioned previously, being that you had your X and your S+, neither of them show up on your portfolio page. Now, I did want to mention that your devices don't show up on your portfolio page at all. Now, the portfolio page would be for the accounts that you might have added, so I'm not sure if it might have been something else, but you've enabled both of them in MetaMask. How do I add each of them in Ledger Live? Now, the first thing that I always think of, and I see the extra questions, so I'm going to go through them one by one, would be that with Ledger Live, it shows the accounts based on the recovery phrase that's added, that's set up, that your device is set up with, right? So if I reset my device, it's going to have a different recovery phrase. Being that you've mentioned that you've enabled them in MetaMask, if it's the same process as me, where we've gone through the connect hardware wallet process, like right here, if we've gone through that process and connected them, the first thing, I just got to enable and unlock my device. But the first thing I would think of would be what derivation path you'd have used. So we'd go through this process, the connect hardware wallet button, and I just want to check, which of the previous accounts that I've added, where might they be? What is the address in particular? I didn't even open the app, so my apologies there. So we got to check which of these apps, which of these addresses that I've added in particular. And you can see I've added the second index, and initially I had gone through the process of sending that transaction specifically because Ledger Live wouldn't look for the next index. So that's the only reason I did that. But in this case, let's say I had selected the legacy or even the BIP44 derivation path when I set it up with Ledger Live, right? This is one of the potential things that I could foresee as an issue. These addresses will never show up in Ledger Live. Same with the ones in BIP44. The reason for that would be that Ledger Live looks at a very specific set of derivation paths. You can create basically an innumerable amount of addresses. So I know my understanding of the Ledger Live team would be that they wanted to keep it as simple as they could regarding that, and only looking for one at a time is generally what they're hoping to do, right? So that would be the first thing that I'd be thinking of. What would be the derivation path? And potentially a little more niche is if the index, so if maybe you had scrolled further along. Now I'm going to go on to the next part where you mentioned if there is a link to reset a former seed phrase. Now you can definitely reset your device, so reset to factory settings. Normally that's just to re-enter the pin incorrectly 3 times, and you can do it from the settings as well. And so those are the 2 ways you'd reset your device. It's the same for the Legend NOS, Legend NOx. Those are generally pretty similar. Now, the next thing you'd want to do is to create a new recovery phrase. Now, there's no way to kind of overwrite a previous recovery phrase or seed phrase at all. That the seed phrase now exists. It has transactions that are signed with it. So if there are assets that were stolen from a previous recovery phrase, for example, you would never be able to be sure that that would be safe anymore. So when you create a new recovery phrase, I'm just going to set up as a new device. It would create an entirely new recovery phrase. So that's what you would be doing in potentially. Now, the other thing would be that you might be, if you're hoping for more of a YouTube style tutorial. I know that Dan definitely has some videos on this channel as well, so might be something to look out for on the channel if you'd want. And with regards to the ticket, because I know that was the first thing or the last thing that you mentioned most recently, try to pop, if you can pop that into the chat about the ticket number in particular. I'll take that on for you to go from there, so we can try to give you a hand in particular. Okay, so hopefully, Karen, that answered most of your questions. I'm sure you might have a couple more, and I'm still going to be here for a little while to try and answer them. Just got on about half an hour with regards to that as well. Now, let's pop on to the next couple of questions. I think we had Glenn Torrey, and I know you mentioned if anyone else can see it. I still couldn't see your questions in the thread in particular, so not sure what might be happening there. I know Dan must have mentioned about the special characters. Might will help to reword the question, see how you go from there. Yvette, so I can see Dan's already answered that. Yep, is it Nano S turns off when it's not plugged in? It is indeed. So definitely something that I actually prefer with my Ledger device. I use my Ledger Nano S because I have an Android device. You can actually go and connect it to your phone as well, because I have, funnily enough, a USB-C port. So USB-C to USB-C, we can connect it to Ledger Live on my phone, and I can manage that on the go as well, which is something that we actually sell in the product section of our page and the accessories. And I think the other thing that I'd always mention would be the seed storage. So I think a lot of guys, they might jump on the pods in particular, which is also a really good option. But I think the seed storage solutions are really, really good investments if you have, a fair amount of assets that you want to store, maintain securely. It's a great way. It'll be acid proof. It'll be acid proof. It's fireproof and everything like that. All right, I see some corresponding questions. Karen, you mentioned, so you're saying you can't reset your ledger with an old seed phrase. You definitely can, and that would be the restore. So when you go through the process, you would be restoring a Ledger device with an existing recovery phrase. Now, the recovery phrase, though, would, let's say if I ported a recovery phrase from MetaMask, right, it wouldn't necessarily be secure, is because it's been on my computer. So that's kind of what I was trying to focus on, and being making sure that you reset the device and you get a new recovery phrase, as opposed to if you're restoring that with a compromised recovery phrase, definitely not something we recommend. But if you need to manage assets, try to manage assets is something you might be able to do. So hopefully I just want to quickly touch on that. Okay, Rob, you mentioned, will that work with iPhone? That is unfortunately, I'm assuming you're talking about the cables in particular. The on-the-go cables, it will not. You would be using Bluetooth. So with the Ledger Nano X in particular, you can use Bluetooth to connect to your iPhone. iOS and generally Apple in particular, my understanding is that they have quite a bit more red tape with regards to the kinds of things that they require, right? And so especially regarding NFTs, transactions in particular, is something that they definitely have their eye on. So it is something that I know that the devs are working with them for. So I'll just pop back. So with the accessories, yes, I would use the on-the-go. It's mostly for Android or for devices. Let's say if you have a MacBook Pro with only USB-C cables, USB-C ports, it might be something there. If you want to collect USB-C to your Ledger Nano S, for example, this is the kind of thing as well. So, but it's just a fact of with Apple, they're a bit more touchy about connections, Lightning as well. So just something to consider there, which I know isn't ideal, but we're trying our best with that one. Karen, I've just noted that case number for you. I can try to go through that. Probably, I know I have a hard stop, but we can try to go through that basically the next thing when I pop on as well. So I've got that for you for sure, that case number. Now, let's see if there's any questions that I would have missed as well. We'll go through. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Again, just don't put your recovery phrase in the chat. I know we mention it all the time. Don't sign any transactions from any random websites. I think this is the other lesser known, but it's becoming more understood that just signing transactions with random smart contracts is not always going to be safe, even if they're supposedly ERC20 or ERC721 standard, or it's not. Also, signing messages isn't always 100% secure, right? If we think about potentially, Kevin Rose, for example, who, I love the guy. I've been following him since his days at Dig, and it's real sad to see potential any issues happening there. So please be careful of what messages you're signing, what transactions you're signing. It's really important that we maintain the security for that in particular. So just going through what you've mentioned, Karen, I need to restore it temporarily to get assets in vaults that just staked for a year out. Now, I think being that I have the case number, I probably am going to do as best I can to actually go through in more detail when we pick up the case. But I'd say that if the stake is like completely locked and you can't get it out, then there's nothing that can be done because it's staked for a particular address in particular. We don't have the authority to change a smart contract or anything like that. So if that's the kind of thing that is happening, that might be we might not be able to change it. If it's a liquid kind of stake, so you have some kind of mechanism to retrieve it before the deadline that you mentioned for a year, it might be something we can work on in particular. But I think the important part, if something had been compromised, let's say I haven't even checked the ticket, so but let's say if something had been compromised, I would never recommend sending funds back in. So just a couple of general things to mention there. Glentori mentions, I sent my Dojilon to Ledger from looks like an exchange from CDC. Oh yeah, my coins do not show in Ledger. Is my coin lost? Now, first thing to mention would be that you'd want to check if tokens and coins are supported. We can go here. There is a page on that is public that you can check what coins are supported, and you can check here Dojilon. Now, Dojilon is supported on Polygon. So the first thing I'd be wondering in this case is if you've sent it on Polygon, if it's sent on another network. So those are the things that would be that I think of first of all. Second thing is to check, and then we can go and check on the corresponding block explorer. In this case, Polygon scan is going to be the one that is going to be important in my eyes, because the address that you send it to, that you send Dojilon to, that we support should be for Polygon. Now, the EVM addresses share 0x prefixes, so it might be a little confusing. So just something to mention there. Those are the first things that comes to mind. Now, Avocado, you mentioned how can I store Beam coin on my Ledger Nano X? Let's check it again. Beam. I don't know if you mean, because Glimmer has. Yes, Karen, I will be emailing you. I don't know that that's what you're mentioning there, Avocado, for Beam, because it's a different ticker than GLMR. I mean, we can double check that, but if it is, if BEAM is the ticker, it may not be supported. It might be something that you'd want to manage. If there is a app for it, if it's a token, we might need to find out more details about that. I mean, we can check it now while I read through the other questions here. John Kubidakis mentions, is it possible to manage selling and buying crypto if the device is broken? It is. Now, how would we do that? You would want to potentially import your recovery phrase. We'd never recommend this normally, but if your device is broken and you desperately need the funds, you would need to manage the assets via a hot wallet, for example. That might be the thing that we generally recommend. So that's the general process. Otherwise, and then you do use a third-party service, an exchange or something to send it, and then they can exchange it for fiat if they need to, buying and selling. But definitely not something we'd normally recommend by importing to a hot wallet. If that's the only one you're using. Personally, I would just use my secondary device. Normally, we do have options for multiple devices. We got the Valentine's Day set as well, and you got the family packs here if you do want to buy for multiple people. Warren, you mentioned you're not using MetaMask, just using Ledger Live. Somehow Ethereum and Shiba Inu receive addresses will not verify. So I just wanted to double check when you mean will not verify, what you mean by that in particular. So let's go through the process. Let's say I'm actually going to verify my Ethereum address now, and we might need to let me know when you might have gotten stuck in particular. So let's say we'll unlock my device first. Boom, boom, boom. And we'll open the Ethereum app, and then I can just go in and add the account. So when I'm doing so, this is the process where you're supposed to be verifying the address, and there's multiple ways. First, we'd want to, add the account. Add the account first, and then go through the receive process to verify the address. That is my bad. So then here, I want to receive assets. I want to check the address. Please only send ETH or Ethereum tokens on to the Ethereum accounts. And we'll go from there. FRMC, I thought I did answer your question, but I'll definitely try to get to you there if I go through that there. But let's go through the receive process. We'll verify that in particular 20388, and I need to make sure now that the address is exactly the same. Now, if the addresses are different, then it's about wondering, calling up the red flags. Hey, do I have malware on my computer? Is there some kind of what is going on with Ledger Live? Is it a genuine version? Did I download it from ledger.com? Or if you're getting an error message when you copy the address, it could be something to do with a clipboard in particular. Those are the first things that come to mind, right? But we make sure we check the address. We go, hey, this is exactly the same as what's on my device, as what's on here. I can hit approve. If I hit reject, it's going to say rejected. So that should be quite clear. But if we retry that, my device is already open. And if I check it and I make sure it's okay, and I see that, hey, these are correct. These match exactly. You can check all of the hex if you want, and you prove, and then it'll say address shared securely, and you can go from there. If you need to re-verify, you can go back and copy that as well. Just a quick note for you as well. So hopefully that answers that question for you, Warren. I'll just try to look for your question there, FRMCF. Yes, don't forget. Yes, I remember you mentioning about Polkadot parachain tokens, but I can see that you've mentioned Polkadot parachain tokens, but I don't see the question in particular. So I'm definitely not trying to skip you there at all. But yeah, don't see the specific question. I can see that you're asking about it. You've mentioned that you want to ask a question about Polkadot parachain tokens, but I don't see the question in particular. So not sure what might be happening there in particular, and go from there. All right, so I did jump over you, Danny, and you mentioned it. Mistakenly sent mined coins to Nano S. Now all your coins are stuck. I've tried key phrase, removed and downloaded everything, still the same. So the first thing I'd mention there, Danny, when you say mined coins, my first thought would be, are these your mined coins? Are they all? Do they have a large number of UTXOs for your public address? That would be the first thing. So if you have a large number of UTXOs, then that would be the first thing that I'd be thinking of. Now, the Ledger device isn't built for mining. I think you've mentioned sent mined coins. But if there is a large number of UTXOs, the device itself isn't so powerful to be able to compute a huge number of inputs and a single output for a UTXO based transaction. So that's the kind of limitation that we might be dealing with in this case. If that is what that is what has happened in particular. That's the first thing. Other than that, when you mentioned coins are stuck, first thing I'd be wondering is if the device or if the assets you can see, I'm assuming, are all on chain. You can see them all; they're all okay. Because the worst case scenario, at the very worst, is that you can always use the recovery phrase in some other wallet. Now, this is a last resort. I always mention it, though, if you absolutely need to. But if you did want to get a hold of us, we can try to guide you through the process, because we'd potentially be wanting to, get the extended public key. I'm going to go with the assumption that we're talking about Bitcoin and some kind of UTXO based chain. But with regards to that, we'd probably want to be grabbing more information from you and just try to troubleshoot that. Generally speaking, if it is mined coins onto the directly onto that your UTXO, an extended public key, that's generally what I'd be thinking about in particular. So FRMCF, I do see the question now, so heads up, I can sort that out for you. I can answer that question rather. But the next question, hopefully, Danny, that answers yours. Definitely get a hold of us. That's, I think, the best way we can actually go into real in-depth there. Now, Umang, you mentioned how to add accounts like VeChain in the Ledger NOS Plus. Now, remember, the accounts aren't actually in the Ledger device. The accounts that you're adding would be in the Ledger Live. Now, VeChain though is not supported with Ledger Live. You can see here it is supported with VeChain Sync. So that's going to be the thing that we're going to use to be able to manage your assets. Wouldn't be possible at this time to do with Ledger Live. I'm just going to pop in VeChain. So that would be the first thing that I mentioned there, just to pop into VeChain, and you should be able to manage your assets from there. So now FRMCF, yes, okay. So can I sign parachain transactions with a ledger or only DOT transactions? Now, with that in particular, let's jump in. I always go to my. So it depends on what parachain, generally speaking. Let's open up Ledger Live here. Now, just as a heads up, guys, I do have a hard stop, but I will try to run through these last few questions before I go. So let's say we got Kusama here. Let's say, for example, let's say any other chains. To be honest, I'm not as familiar with Polkadot as you might be, but I'm just popping in Kusama for now. Anything else? I don't even have Polkadot installed at the moment on this test device. But generally speaking, if it is something that you'd be wanting to do with Polkadot or one of the parachains, we'd want to make sure that the application is installed that corresponds. If there is no application, we wouldn't be able to manage it with the device, unfortunately. Generally, we'd be working with the developers. So if the developers, if you know them, have them jump on with us, and normally on our Discord, and we can try to give them a hand in integration. Now, the next thing, especially if it's a parachain, you'd be going to Polkadot.js, Astar if there isn't an Efinity app. So Astar just does ring a bell, so that might be a little bit of a giveaway already. Yeah, so we've got Astar already, and it's something you can manage with the device, but not necessarily within Ledger Live. So once we install this, we can potentially jump onto normally Polkadot.js or some kind of third-party wallet I'd normally be going through to manage the asset. Let's check Efinity though. That doesn't quite ring a bell as much off the top of my head. If only I could what's the word? If only I could remember all of them off the top of my head, I'd be a great. Okay. So basically, we'll only be able to sign once there is a dedicated app for the parachain. Generally speaking, yes, that would be, especially for Polkadot in particular. I did want to run through some of the final few questions here before we jump out. All right, so Danny, I think you mentioned that you bought it from a miner. I don't know if definitely something I'd want to investigate further with you. You only found the coins after they were sent to you, so definitely want to try and dig into that further with you, because if they're sent from somewhere else, the inputs from that coin shouldn't matter. If you bought like a private key or a recovery phrase, for example, that sounds super sketchy, so it'd be something that I'd hopefully be wanting to go through with you. Now, David, Kasiba, you mentioned that you follow your instructions to reinstall and deleting the cache, and that nothing works, that we've fixed some Ethereum synchronization issues, but not BTC. It might be something that we'd want to check in with you further. I'm not sure if you mean me specifically, if maybe I've spoken to you. If definitely one of us has spoken to you, we definitely want to try to continue to troubleshoot that with you further. I can double check, I can go through, but I wasn't having any BTC synchronization issues on my device at the time, or at previously as well. So definitely something we want to troubleshoot with you. Danny Noble, can't send any other tokens. You can see them all. Ethereum, Funfair, Chainlink. Funfair I'm not directly aware of. Chainlink, the first thing I'd wondering about that would be what error message you're getting in particular, if you're getting any, if what might be happening, if you're all up to date. Those are the general things that I'll be going through as well. David, yeah, if you can pop the question, the ticket number in the chat, we can actually have a look through with you as well for that one too. Now, Jules Andol, just as I finish up, we've got you're getting errors trying to send BTC from your Ledger Nano X. The first question would be what the specific error would be. David, yeah, if you have that case number, pop that in the chat. I'll be the one that has a chat with you and go from there, if not already, and we'll try to look into that. But yeah, don't think it's isolated to just you necessarily. But obviously that's what we want to troubleshoot for everyone going forward. Again, 60 days, it'd be the specific error that you're getting with where you're withdrawing from or sending to and from in particular, and trying to go from there. So yeah, David, hopefully I just want to stay on till you are able to pop in the ticket number. If you don't already have one, you can go to support.ledger.com and get that. So that's here. And then you can even mention my name, pop the ticket number here on Twitter or wherever. They'll be able to send that case over to me and we can have a look at that for you. Not something that I'm directly aware of. I've got, Bitcoin on my personal machine. So we definitely would want to know more if something is happening and is not isolated to, of course, to anyone. We'd want to try to help everyone from there. So all you guys, Pixelmedo, or Pixelmedo, Trilzando, if you guys are having those issues, you can jump into the support.ledger.com as well, get a hold of us. Yeah, you can even mention my name if you need to, but all of the guys should be able to give you a hand. I know that some of the guys will be doing some live chat as well going forward, so they might even be able to give you a hand there as well. So hopefully I answered everyone's questions. Sorry I had to cut the end of that short, but David, hopefully we can get a hold of you, especially if you've been having that for 2 weeks. We'll try to give you a hand as best we can. Again, I always mention this as well. Don't share your 24 words. Don't sign any transactions you don't trust. We want you guys to stay safe as best we can. If you ever have any issues, go to support.ledger.com and you can go to the bottom right to select contact us, which is just going to be below my profile picture there. Cool. So thanks guys. Hope you have a great rest of the week. Stay safe out there in the markets.